I pledge allegiance
allegiance
to the
to the
flag
flag
of the United
of the
States of
United States of
America
America
and
and
to
to
the
the
republic
republic for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
and
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty and
liberty
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all. Okay, the next item up is a roll call. I'll start. Is Mr. Michelli here?
Here.
Mr. Morrow?
Here.
Mrs. Battaglia?
Here.
Dr. Nowak? Mr. Feldman?
Here.
Mrs. Ocasio?
Here.
Mrs. Jason?
here.
And I am here. Can I have a motion to approve the roll?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Welcome, everybody. Tonight is our budget presentation to be followed by the Meet the Candidates night. And I'm going to turn it right over to Mr. Day and Mr. Feldman to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So tonight is our budget hearing. The first part is our opportunity to share with the public our proposed budget for 2020-21. And I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Finance, Mr. Don Feldman. Mr. Feldman.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Welcome everybody. This is a required meeting that we need to do as part of our budget process. But to kind of frame it up for everybody, this is, to get to this point, the board adopted the budget a week ago this evening on May the 19th. We had 4 separate budget study sessions, one in February, again another in March, one in April, and one on the 12th of May, with the board adopting the budget on May 19th. It's important to note on that first slide, Mr. Day, if you wouldn't mind. There we go. The budget number of $83,347,690 sets a cap for us for spending for the 2021 school year. And given where we are in New York State, you've probably all heard from the governor that there are potential mid-year revenue cuts to state aid. By setting this cap for spending, we believe it allows us the best opportunity to make some spending reductions in, equivalent to any aid reductions that we might get throughout the course of the year. And couple that, if we were, if the governor came out, prior to the adoption of the budget, if the governor were to come out and say that he was cutting state aid by 20% and we cut our budget accordingly, and in July, if the federal government said that we're going to restore that aid cut with some federal funding, we wouldn't be allowed to kind of exceed that number that we set with the aid cut. So this number is a budget like we would go out in any other year, but it's one that is workable to do some potential mid-year cuts if state aid were to be cut. Just a couple of highlights there about this, the proposed budget of $83,347,690. It does, as I mentioned, maintain all current programming at all levels across all school buildings. It maintains our annual bus purchase. We plan to purchase in 2021 4 new buses. And the budget does fall beneath the New York State imposed tax cap. And it does include a capital outlay project line that was once $75,000 and we've increased it to $100,000. That's the line that we've used over the last number of years to do some door replacements in the high school and some smaller capital type projects. The proposed budget again from this present school year to the 2021 school year represents a budget-to-budget increase of $1.9 million, which translated into percentage is 2.38%. We're required to present the budget in a 3-part format: administrative, program, and capital. The administrative portion of the budget provides takes a look at all the overall general support and management activities for the school district. This includes central office, the business department, curriculum and instruction, and from the administrative standpoint, the instructional leaders of our administrative team. The program part consists of instruction and educational support for all of our students. This includes the overall instruction, teacher salaries, special education, student services, extracurricular activities, and transportation. And then the last piece of it, the capital portion, includes our buildings and grounds salaries, equipments, overall maintenance of the district, and our debt service for our existing projects. Next slide. So from a graphical standpoint, the three-part budget from the administrative side for this year represents in dollar figures $6.3 million, $6,310,630. The program budget, $64,009,150. And the capital portion of the budget, $12,937,910. Next slide, please. From a percentage standpoint, the administrative piece of the budget represents 7.5% of our overall expenditure budget. The program budget represents 76.4% of our overall budget, up slightly from last year. And then the capital portion is 16.1%, remaining stable from this present year. On the revenue side, just kind of give you some highlights as to where we are in terms of percentages. From the revenue side, 59.4% of our revenue comes from our community and real property taxes. That translates to about $49.2 million. State aid is next at 28.4% of our annual budget, translates to about $23.6 million. The use of reserves and fund balance as a revenue in our budget represents 4% of our overall budget, which is about $3.32 million. Our use of debt service reserve is about 1% of our budget, which is just around $900,000. Sales tax, 3.7% of our overall budget, which this year is about $3.12 million. And then the other kind of catch-all piece, pilots, tuitions from other districts and interest, 3.5%, which translates to about $2.78 million. Just a couple of notes there along the side. We did decrease our debt service usage by $310,000. We've also, based upon where we stand today, we've decreased our estimate of sales tax revenue going forward, just based upon the pandemic. And again, just you'll see, if you've seen Your Schools, you'll see that we presented a budget that did have a budget gap because of some decreases in state aid from the governor's proposal to the legislative proposal. And then with the decrease in sales tax and things along those lines, we did get to a budget gap of about $775,000 that we will use kind of our savings from what we're not spending this year to roll over into reserves next year to help us close our budget gap for next year, as well as to use, any additional monies for potential aid cuts next year. We have about $1.8 million that we believe that will be in excess surplus for this budget year. This just gives you an idea from a debt service perspective as to where we are. We are next year, around this time, we'll start with a capital project, kind of working on our service center in our transportation area, but this gives you an idea as to where our debt service funding is. Again, the idea is to keep it there at a relatively stable rate, which is what we've done to minimize any spikes to the local share in terms of tax dollars. So that just gives you a picture of kind of where we stand. As I mentioned earlier, the budget does fall within the New York State imposed property tax cap. The tax levy increase, the proposed tax levy rather to the budget this year is $49,532,205. It's an increase from last year of $1.386 million, translated to about a 2.88% annual increase. As I did mention before, it does fall within the tax cap, and by New York State education law, we are only required to have a simple majority to pass our budget vote on June 9th. And this gives you kind of a snapshot, an early snapshot of what we anticipate, perhaps what a tax bill would look like. We're using an assessed value home of $150,000 on the Tonawanda side and on the Amherst side. On the Tonawanda side, we estimate at a 91% equalization rate, we estimate a tax bill of about $2,119, which translates to a $55 increase. On the Tonawanda side, the equalization rate dropped yet again to 33%, and that translates to about a $2,175 tax bill, which is an increase of about $90. And then when you do, and you should have received your ballots, and then either today or in the next day or so, but when you do see your ballot come across through the mail, you'll see that you're voting on three things. You're voting on the overall budget, which will be proposition number one. The second proposition is an authorization to use our capital reserve funds to help us mediate some flooding issues that the high school is having. We anticipate, if things go well and the use of the reserve funds passes, that the work will begin over the summertime. It's been approved at State Education Department as an emergency project, which means that we get, rather than get our aid back over a 15-year period, because it's an emergency project, that aid comes back to us all in 1 year. We anticipate the cost of the project being around $700,000. We do have in our capital reserve fund, we do have a balance of about a little over $1.5 million. So the use of these reserves, it's required that we have public authorization, but it's also important to note that with the use of these reserve funds, that it has zero tax impact because this is money that we've been setting aside for projects exactly like this. So that kind of, in a nutshell, gives you what you'll be voting on your absentee ballots in terms of budget. Mr. Day, I'm going to turn it back to you, and if we have questions, we can certainly answer those from the audience.
Thanks, Mr. Feldman. So if anybody of any district resident would like to ask a question or make a statement, in your kind of program bar at the end, there's a little piece called reactions. And you should be able to press on that if you want to just raise your hand. That would allow you to be able to be recognized and ask a question that you might have.
I think Mr. Ravenel has a question.
Of course, Mr. Ravenel has a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Raymond.
I think you've done a fine job there, Don, for your first year budget, even in the midst of all the craziness. But I just wondering, simple question, can you show the ballot and what it looks like? Do you have a copy of that somewhere?
We could get one, perhaps by the end of the Meet the Candidates night, we can show you what it looks like.
Mrs. Battaglia is actually holding one up. There's an envelope. The envelope, Mr. Johnson shows you when you go in there, there's your ballot. And it also, there's an envelope, an attestation envelope that people have to sign.
For me to see that, I can just touch the frame there and it'll come up? How does that work?
This is a physical piece of paper.
Yeah, I know, but I can't see it in the small frame that it's in.
Oh,
Mr.
Here,
Day, perhaps we'll scan one and you can share it at the end of Meet the Candidates.
Mrs. Battaglia, if you could speak for a minute, or Mr. Johnson, it should, perhaps, does that work?
I can see
yeah,
it.
I was going to say, if I start talking, it should bring it up on the screen while I'm talking.
I see
And
it.
it's very similar to the same type of one that we've already used in the past. It's going to go through the voting machines just like in the past. The difference is when somebody sends it back, it has to go in an internal envelope that they sign and attest that they're the person who received it, and then that goes into a separate envelope, so it doesn't have that signature showing when it goes through the mail.
I see it now. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
And
Mr.
just-
Ravenel, it's also important to note that all the ballots need to be here in district office by 5 o'clock on Tuesday, June the 9th. You can mail them back. Certainly it's postage paid, but you're also welcome to come in and drop them off to district office.
I'm also one budget question, Don.
Yeah.
I don't have the May 26th presentation. I have the May 12th. And there was some risk of as much as 3 million. in the state
That's
budget.
correct. So if you know, the governor's been talking about budget cuts in excess of about 20%. 20% of, for us to, you know, just straight foundational aid is about $3.5 million.
Yeah. That's a pretty scary number.
Indeed.
And I would assume you have some kind of plan for that if in fact.
We do. We've worked on some options that we've, you know, if the time comes and we need to do that, we'll work through that with the board. But we're confident that we'll get to a budget place that, you know, maintains as many programs as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Heike Jacob, if you'd like to unmute yourself and start your video. If you have a question, I see your hand is raised.
Hi. Yes, my name is Heike Jacob. I'm a resident and a Sweet Home alumna. And I was wondering if you could break out the superintendent salary and the board member salary, since they're one line item on the budget.
Well, the Board of Education does not receive a salary per se, but Mrs. Jacob, if you go on our district website on the 2020 budget page, 2021 budget page at the bottom, there are publications in the budget book. There's a 2021 budget book that kind of outlines administrator salaries, including our superintendents. So that's probably your best resource.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before we get to meet the candidates?
Nadine.
Ms. Acasio?
I just wanted to make a real quick statement for everybody who's on the call, because as I've been seeing in the media, there's a lot of misconceptions that with school being closed, we're saving this boatload of money that we're just stash piling away. And so I wanted to just clarify a little bit so that the public would understand as well that there has been a lot of unfunded mandates that have been out that have been given to us by the governor as well. And just recently, the governor has said that the school district will continue to have meals and pay for, you know, and pay for childcare for first responder children. So there's still a lot of things that your school district is at work. But, you know, even as the doors are shuttered on the schools, we're still at work for you. So I just want to make sure that people understand we're still working. Mr. Feldman's still there creating a budget for our school district. So, you know, it's not that everything has shut down and we've forgotten about our, you know, the community. We're still here for you, you know, and there's still a lot of things that are being required of the district as well.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, we'll close the budget hearing portion of tonight's event. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Sherry McNamara, who is the district clerk, and she is responsible for facilitating tonight's Meet the Candidate session. And at this point, if all the candidates, if you unmute yourself, then you'll be able to speak, and Mrs. McNamara will facilitate. So just tonight as we go, each candidate will be given an opportunity to make an opening statement. And then we have received questions at our boe@sweethomeschools.org email address, and those questions will be posed. And then following that, if other questions from district residents would like to be posed, we'll use the hand raise function to attend to that. And having conducted a number of these meetings, it's hard to be watching many things at the same time. So we're going to try to help watch the sidebar so Mrs. McNamara can concentrate on the event. So I believe we'll start, and the statements will go in alphabetical order by candidate. And then as we go through the questions, we'll start adjusting who goes first, and it'll rotate through. So everybody will have an opportunity to go first and have their spots in the order. So Mrs. McNamara, you're on.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So we're going to start with the opening statements. And first up tonight, we have Brian Leibel. Mr. Leibel?
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate everybody being here on a beautiful night and taking time out of your evening. And also, I want to say in these uncertain times, I hope that everyone's well and safe and healthy. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Brian Leibel. I'm 43 years old and a lifelong resident of Western New York. And it's with dedication and commitment that I'm asking for your support and vote in the upcoming election. John F. Kennedy once said that children are the world's most valuable resource and its best hope for our future. And when you vote for the school board, you must decide who you will trust with that precious resource. I just want everybody to know that I will put our children first, I'll fight for our families, and I support our teachers. My wife Jen and I have 3 children of our own. Grace is 6, Jack is 5, and Jane is 3. And I'm excited to tell everybody that we're expecting our 4th in June. So as a young family, we're going to have over 50 combined years of schooling ahead, and we're committed to the Sweet Home Schools. And having a big family, we have a lot riding on the success of the schools. I also want everybody to know that I'm not seeking this position with any hidden agenda. My only intent is to serve the public. Myself, I was educated in public schools, and I learned there that a dream can be accomplished with hard work and perseverance. And I have a personal appreciation for students and parents and the diverse community, including those with special needs, economic, racial, and religious diversity. I recognize that Sweet Home is a diverse community, and I know that each school has its own unique identity and diversity, from Glendale to Willow Ridge, Heritage Heights, to Maplemere, the middle school and the high school. But at the end of the day, we're really all in this together. I'm also an entrepreneur. I have a degree from Canisius College and from the University of Notre Dame. I have 25 years of business experience, which, by the way, that began with a public school internship. That internship lasted all through college and then 7 years in a full-time position. I'm a strong supporter of employee pay and benefits, and my own company provides 100% fully paid benefits to our employees. I'm personally connected to Sweet Home. My father, Mike Leibel, is a school bus aide. My sister Sharon is a lunch aide. My cousin Jolene is a principal at Glendale. And I understand that everybody makes it work, from the teacher's assistants, to the lunch aide, to the school bus aide, to the teachers, to the principals, and the administrators. It really takes a village. And last, I just want to mention that my father and my wife are both military veterans, and I come from a family with a strong history of supporting service to our country and our community. So as I mentioned, my only intent is to serve the public, to fight for our families. We're all in this together, every student, one community, ready for the future. And I'm confident that my leadership and hard work can help the Sweet Home Schools. And I ask that you please consider voting for me. I'm first on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leibel. Next up, we have Kaylee McDonald. Kaylee?
Gotta unmute myself, sorry. Thank you. I'd just like to echo Brian and saying that I hope everyone is safe and healthy during this really crazy time. It's really nice to see everyone's faces, even if it's over a computer screen. My name is Kaylee McDonald. I'm currently working on my doctorate studies at UV in political science. I am a Sweet Home alum, class of 2011. So I lived through a Sweet Home education, and I know how important it is to preserve all of the great opportunities that Sweet Home provides their students. Everything that I've gone on to accomplish in my life, studying in 3 different languages on 4 different continents, started at Sweet Home, especially my love for languages. Through the opportunities Sweet Home gave me, I've learned firsthand about many of the beautiful cultures represented by Sweet Home's amazingly diverse community. As a candidate, I am creative, innovative, and flexible. We're facing unprecedented decisions and cannot rely on the same old solutions that have worked in the past. I bring with me a perspective that no one else running can offer. I know what Sweet Home graduates are facing when they go out into the world because I am a Sweet Home graduate. I'm living that life right now. I know what worked for me as a student, and I know what didn't. I know what I needed more of and what helped to shape me into the person I am today. I have really big creative ideas for how we can keep moving Sweet Home forward into the future, especially in the face of COVID-19. I also know Sweet Home families. I've been in Sweet Home from kindergarten all the way up through graduation. I've been their friend and classmate. I've been their neighbor and babysitter, their student and their tutor. I've seen the struggles that our families face. You know, while a lot of us are very lucky to have escaped through, I don't want to say escaped, to have gotten through COVID-19 unscathed, we also have families who are struggling to feed their children. And that's huge. That's everything, you know? And we can't lose sight of that. Our teachers are also tackling an entire new era of instruction, largely without the guidance of state or federal government. And they're doing it without complaint too, which is, you know, such a huge thing. As a board, we are responsible for the safekeeping and caretaking of our district and making sure that every member of Sweet Home, whether it's a parent or a teacher or a student or even just a neighbor, has the resources that they need to get through this together. If it becomes solely a money issue, our students' favorite programs will get cut. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. While the budget will play a huge role in our school's next few years, we cannot approach COVID-19 from a financial perspective alone. They aren't just dollars being cut. They are the things that take an education from being a paragraph in a textbook to being the lessons that shape a child's life. A holistic view, balancing the real life consequences our Sweet Home families face with the financial realities of a post-COVID-19 world, will be essential in preserving and building upon Sweet Home's values and what we offer our students. I'm not a politician, and I'm not here to play games or to trick anyone. I'm here because I think I can do a good job caring for this community, and because I want to give back to the community who made me who I am. I'm interested in working with everyone to get the job done, not taking sides or pitting so-and-so against so-and-so. I think moving forward through COVID-19 and getting back to our new normal, we're going to need to be working with compassion and compromise as our saving graces. And these are the qualities that I will bring to the Sweet Home Board of Education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kaylee. Next up, we have Michael Morrow. Mike?
Okay. I want to thank everybody for attending today. And again, hope everybody is staying safe and saying prayers that we can move forward down the road. I'm going to do a little bit something different today. I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm going to talk about our school district. And during my first year on the school board, it was mandated by New York State that we had received training for fundamentals of being an effective school board member. And we had to attend the fiscal oversight responsible training. And it was also recommended by our superintendent in those days to read a book by Jim Collins, Good to Great. I know Dirk can relate to that book. The major focus from that book was To get to great, you had to hire the best staff. And one of our roles and responsibility of board members is hiring the staff members. We approve all new employees through a process, schools introduction process. Individuals are sent to our superintendent, who re-interviews the candidate, and then Mr. Day will send those recommendations to the board for approval. We were always told that we are hiring the best. Well, come back last March 13th, 15th, when the county executive closed the schools, our staff, without any preparation, had to develop a new way of reaching out to every student here at Sweet Home and teaching a new method, so those students can meet the graduation rates. And it was all to meet the governor's executive order. Our food service had to develop a plan to provide meals that is mandated by regulations under the anticipated school closures. Transportation had to plan routes, and meeting areas to drop off student meals. Those original mandates, mandated guidelines changed. Our school employees and our community stepped up to volunteer their time to complete these new procedures. Over 4,200 meals are prepared and delivered each week. Our technicians had to keep the technology running to meet the needs of online teaching. Office personnel kept everybody organized. Buildings and grounds, mechanics, custodial still had to maintain the school equipment and clean our schools with the idea that schools would open up. These last 10 to 11 weeks have shown our community that we do only hire the best. I'd like to say thank you to my colleagues on the board, Mr. Day, the administrators, teachers, service of personnel for your devotion and creativity to find a way to help all of our students during these difficult times. And to the Sweet Home community for your patience and understanding. In closing, I would like to read a quote from President Reagan that I feel that fits the Sweet Home way. There's no limit on what people can achieve if people don't worry about who gets the credit. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Next up, we have Mr. Ravenel.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. I want to say up front here, I'm about to read something that's pretty hard hitting. And it's really me trying to connect to many of the voters that don't participate normally in our school board elections. And I want to thank you for, again, this opportunity to run for the school board and this opportunity to speak to, and I'm assuming that I'm speaking mostly to the public here. And again, that's what this spiel is all about. So here goes. The teachers in Sweet Home school districts are the 4th highest paid in Erie County, yet our district ranks 34th in academic standings, according to the Business First Western New York school rankings. Our neighboring districts, Williamsville and Amherst, ranks 2nd and 7th, while paying their teachers less. I want to raise our district's ranking and performance, and that is why I'm asking for your vote. It goes without saying that improving education for our children is a passion of mine. I have served for 20 years on our school board. I fought to provide a quality education at a reasonable price for our children. I lost an election to our school board in 2019 because the teachers union singled me out. I spoke out against the union's attempt to control the operations of the district. The teachers union has many supporters currently on the board. In these tough economic times, we need someone who will fight for the parents, students, and the taxpayers. The teachers union's answer to solving every problem is we need more money. That is the job of the union. Someone has to be negotiating on the side of the taxpayer. I'm not endorsed by the teachers union, and I wear that as a badge of honor. In a normal school year election, there are at best 700, 800 votes cast. This year, a ballot is being mailed to all 22,000 eligible voters. So here's an opportunity for the community to cast a vote easily to make a difference in your school district. My family has lived here for 35 years, and all of my children have graduated from Sweet Home. I have a business degree from Canisius College. My 34-year career as a certified financial planner gives me expertise needed to guide district's financial decisions. we can be fiscally responsible while working to provide top-notch educational programs. Serving on the Amherst Senior Citizens Foundation Board taught me about their concerns and issues for our seniors. I've talked about that while I was on the board. The level of poverty in our seniors in Amherst is pretty scary. My time on the Amherst Recreation Commission taught me the values of recreation in our town and schools. There's a high correlation. We all know that. Those of us on the board know the correlation between academic success and extracurricular activity. I strongly support that. So if you're happy paying top dollar for a school district that ranks 34th in academic performance, then I'm not your candidate. However, if you believe like me that our district can do much more with existing resources, then I'm asking for your vote. Our best days for the district are in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ravenel. Next up, we have Mr. Justin Rogers.
Got it for unmute. Good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Rogers. I'm a proud father of a daughter who's in 2nd grade and another daughter who will be joining the school ranks in a little less than a year and a half at Willow Ridge Elementary. I'm also a spouse to a teacher in the Cheektowaga Central School District. In my professional life, I'm employed by Cornell University as the Executive Director of Cornell Cooperative Extension in Niagara County. In this role, I oversee agriculture, horticulture, nutrition education, and excitingly, 4-H youth development programming. In a role that I vacated in October 2019, I was Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Canisius College for 4 years. In total, I've served over 14 years in college admissions and higher education, 7 of those years as a Director of Admissions. From November of 2018 to June of 2019, I served on the Sweet Home Board of Education when a seat was prematurely vacated. When I had the pleasure of serving on the board, I was extremely active in a relatively short time. I was a liaison to Willow Ridge Elementary, where I met regularly with Bob Polino, the school principal. I served on the district data team committee, attended board educational events at Erie One BOCES, and participated in high-level and sensitive meetings with community partners that happened within the district. I also attended as many district functions as possible as my schedule would allow. I would plan to continue this level of commitment if elected to a permanent seat. In addition to my experience mentioned, I also have extensive knowledge in strategic planning, grant writing, budget development and management, youth and staff development, nutrition education, process improvement, and data analysis. I believe that a quality that differentiates me from the other candidates is my work experience in college admissions. This experience has provided me with the perspective of what is needed to prepare a person to be college ready. When it comes to discussions regarding curriculum, resource allocation regarding course offerings, and suitable alternatives to college readiness, I believe that I can bring great perspective and discernment. Additionally, other than Mr. Leibel, I have children who are currently attending school within the district. This advantage would give me additional insight on how the district is achieving its goals and serving our teachers and students. Along with my aforementioned remarks, I'd like for you to consider what my goals for my time on the board will be. First, I will finish at where I left off when I was serving on the board in 2019. I would hit the ground running and continue my involvement. Second, I would like to continue my work with the District Data Committee to continue to find ways to understand trends in our student performance metrics. Third, I want to be a leader in the district and local Western New York community of leading in the recovery from COVID-19. I have been a spectator of the stress that this crisis has put on our students, my daughter Mia, and on a teacher, my wife Lindsay. For our students' remote learning, it has been grueling. At first, it was puzzling to watch a little girl who had the stamina to be at school all day would suddenly be exhausted after 30 minutes of at-home reading. The students just wanted to sit at their desks and work in a manner of how they were accustomed, see their friends, and idolize their teacher. This has been tough. Watching my wife, a teacher, I've seen her continuing to strive to get her students to progress, an unwavering commitment to them, even from a distance. However, that commitment hasn't come without its battle scars. I've wiped the frustrated tears, debated what reasonable expectations are, continually reset the Wi-Fi, and repoured the wine glass. This has been tough on our teachers too. We need to heal and push forward on developing the new normal and how we can get back to as much of the old normal as possible too. I was frustrated when I was not elected last year. I had poured my heart into that election. I almost didn't want to run again this year, to be perfectly honest. If it had not been for COVID-19, I might not be here tonight. After what I saw my daughter and wife go through, I felt compelled to serve again and help lead the recovery of this district I'm so proud to be a member of. I hope to have the opportunity to do so. Please vote for me, Justin Rogers, to the Sweet Home Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Now we're going to move ahead with the candidate questions. So we're going to go in rotating order with who gets to go first. So Kaylee McDonald, you will get the first shot at the first question. If anybody, as we're going along, needs me to repeat a question, just let me know. So Kaylee, the first question is, do you have any professional experience that you feel qualifies you to oversee an $80 million budget and 600 employees?
Thank you, Ms. McNamara. So I do not have an education in finance, and I do not have an education in business, but I do have an extensive education in political science, which is the study of how resources are shared in a community, what you do with those resources, and who has access to them. And this is what I have spent the past decade of my life studying. And I think when you approach a financial situation from that outlook, instead of a, where can we cut funding to save us the most money? When you approach a situation from that perspective, you only have one way forward, and that's taking money from something that you're using it towards and pulling it somewhere else. When you approach that same topic from a perspective of what resources do we have, what resources do we need, and who needs them, it opens up an entirely different conversation. It opens up a conversation that is hopeful, that invokes the whole community that is being involved and how that community interacts together. I think that gives me a different perspective, more of a problem-solving approach rather than a problem-creating approach. And I think that kind of difference will be really, really valuable, especially in the upcoming years as we make really difficult financial decisions relating to COVID-19 budget gaps and things like that. It's not the board of the budget, it's the board of education. So the question can't just be about the bottom dollar. It has to be about what we're using that money for and who we're using that money for. And I think my education gives me an excellent outlook on how to approach those kind of questions.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Next, Mr. Morrow, same question to you.
Okay. I don't have any professional experiences setting budgets on my work level. I did environmental work for Niagara Mohawk, which is now National Grid. I had to set up with contractors and disposal sites, and we had a department budget to fit into. But I think my 20 years on the school board has taught me a lot about budget development. In the first year, which all the new board members have to attend, is to a fiscal oversight training. Our role as a board, which is set by educational law, is that we're an oversight board that looks at the board development. By our policy and by educational law, the superintendent is responsible for developing the budget. We as a board, we get together, we'll look at whatever the state's going to propose. I mean, we had a budget proposed to us in February by the governor. Within a month, that budget. I have to say, my 20 working with different business financial persons, working with how many different board members too, is that we've always found a way to balance the books at the other end without cutting programs. But plus, part of the experience, I've been part of 5 construction projects that we've have done in Sweet Home, starting back in 2002 with the elementary buildings in high school. I think 2008 was the middle school. We did the athletic field with the Dexter Terrace, and now we are going to do this service garage starting in 2021. So I would have to say my experience is in the past 20 years has been my plus for budget development.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Next up, Mr. Ravenel, same question.
Certainly, yeah. My career in the financial services industry certainly lends itself to this, but also the 20 years of dealing with budgets on the school board certainly doesn't hurt. So I think I have a little background on that, but I want to address the notion that looking at tough times, there has to be, and I think we've done a pretty good job of it. We have to be able to get all the parties involved to say, this is where we need to get to, and this is how we're going to do it. And it's not just cuts, it's efficiencies, a little give and take in parts of both staff and management. So again here, I think with good leadership going forward, our best days are ahead of us. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers?
So I've obviously was involved with the budget planning last year when I served on the board, but in my administrative roles, I've built budgets for the past 7 to 8 years at various private institutions, and currently at my current employer working with Cornell University and Cornell Cooperative Extension. So I've been involved in that process about maximizing revenues and minimizing expenses, yada, yada, yada. But that's an important process and a part of our charge for the roles and responsibilities with managing the budget, or and overseeing the budget, as Mr. Morrow mentioned. And it's also important point to make also is that's the role of the superintendent as well, as to oversee that staff. That's what the district hires him to do. So that's not necessarily a specific board responsibility, but what the board needs to be charged with is assisting with developing the priorities and representing the priorities of what the district needs and what the district we want to give guidance to the administration and the staff to try to execute. And I think that that's an important part of, somewhat related to my background with strategic planning and agenda setting and identifying what those priorities are, and to kind of do resource allocation based upon what the highest priorities are, with obviously taking time to get input into the process, as Sweet Home does a good job of doing that already.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Next up, Mr. Leibel.
Well, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I have 25 years of business experience. I worked at Ernst & Young, the world's second largest accounting firm, and worked with clients like Rich Products, Delaware North, Children's Hospital. Some of these clients have over $1 billion of revenue. I'm an entrepreneur. The firm that I founded 8 years ago, we now are overseeing $300 million of wealth in Western New York. And so, I'm a CPA, so I'm very comfortable dealing with numbers and budgeting and things like that. I think, though, the one thing I want to emphasize is, although I have that financial background, as I mentioned also, I have the background of growing up in a relatively poor community and understanding how those numbers impact children and families, and also the repercussions of what happens. It's easy to say, let's just cut here or cut there, but for instance, a target for the public might be, let's cut salaries of administrators if they make too much money. Well, good administrators help to manage the budget for all the other departments. And, so we need good administrators, and we need to be careful about what we cut. And I think one of the perspectives that I bring is somebody who's managed the budgets, but also managed organizations and started one from scratch, that, I can see beyond the numbers to really what that all means. And so I think that's really a strength that I bring to the table.
Thank you, Mr. Leibel. For our second question, we're going to start with Mr. Morrow. Question is, the school board does not have many parents with school-age children sitting on the board and may have fewer than half after this election. What is your view about parent representation on the board, and why do you feel you would be a good representative of current parents? Mr. Morrow?
Well, it's always a plus, excuse me, to have parents, they have school-age kids in the elementary, middle school, or high school. But as a parent, I mean, you're not, if you're a parent on the board, you're not there to represent your kids or your kid's school. You have to represent the whole school district. You represent all the kids. It's an advantage and it's not a disadvantage to have that. I guess most of our board, I think, well, all of our board, I have to say, is involved in schools one way or whether activities during the school, moving up days. And I've looked at, well, for me, I'm only going to speak for myself about being involved in the schools. Is I'm retired. I have a great advantage of getting into the school during the day. And I love going to the elementary, seeing the special programs. And I do get to talk to the staff, the administrators, and some of the parents' functions tonight. We're all board members are liaisons to every PTA, PTO, or PTA. So we're meeting with the parents, mom and dads, and administrators at every building. So again, going back to the original question, it doesn't hurt to have a parent on the board. And I'm going to be a little bit different. If I'm reelected again, I'm going to have a grandson that's going to be attending Maplemere next year. So I guess I'll have one music teacher as a band director, and hopefully I'll have a grandson able to make it to Maplemere next year.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Mr. Ravenel?
There's a saying that you can't see the forest through the tree, standing in front of a tree. I know on the board we've assigned board members to different buildings, and people have a tendency to drift towards maybe their child's interests, like me in the past was hockey. But yeah, the tough thing about a board member is you really have to represent the community as a whole and try to bring forward to your decision making and policy making what you feel is in the best interest of the community. So yes, it's good to have that type of exposure or that type of connection. As a matter of fact, it was, I don't know how many years ago, we made a decision to put a non-voting student on the board. I think that's been a great connection for the board to the, at least the high school and the student population. So I, like Mike, well, I don't have a grandchild that lives in town to go to the Sweet, but if they were, I certainly would expect them to attend Sweet Home schools. All three of my children didn't go through the school system. They've done very well because of that. So, yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ravenel. Mr. Rogers?
Thank you. Well, I have children in the district. We'll have one currently. We'll have another one in a year and a half during the term of this seat. I obviously believe in the perspective of being able to see the day-to-day as far as how the school system is operating from a parent's point of view, seeing how transportation is working, seeing how direct communications coming from the school, whether that be from the administration or if it's coming from the teachers themselves. I can see technology that's being utilized, the events that are happening locally and across the district. And I believe that perspective allows me to And because I was able to do it last year, be able to speak from that point of view about that, how that would impact the children that are part of the district. So I, sitting with this board in the past, they have very good intentions and, have lots of years of experience, but I think it's also of value to have someone have a fair number of people who are at different schools within the district, who are representing across the district, who have students that are, participating in our academic environment. So I believe that, to be able to have that firsthand source and to speak from that back to the board is a valuable member that can really help enhance everything that we're trying to accomplish within Sweet Home.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Leibel?
Well, I would echo what Justin just said, and I think it is important that we have parents represented on the school board. I know we do have a few, and I think it gives you an intimate connection with the school and what's going on with our kids. As I said, I'm going to have 4 kids going through Sweet Home in the next 18 years. And, especially in this time, parents really, some parents have really been challenged, all right? That we're not teachers. And I think unless you have the perspective of what it's like to be home and see your kids and they're under the table, or they're you want to go out and play, or they don't want to sit and do the work, they behave differently with parents than they do with their teachers. These are all intimate experiences that a board member could bring to the table. But I think the other thing that's important in the nature of this question, at least the way I perceive it, is that this question is about balance, right? And so, somebody else mentioned that it's not it's not necessarily a detriment. I think for any one person, it may not be a detriment not to have kids going through, but I think the board as a whole needs to have a varied perspective and ideas. And so, having enough board members that are parents, that would be helpful. Having some board members that are grandparents is helpful, right? I mean, our grandparents play a large role in our children. Some grandparents are picking up the kids every day from school and dropping them off, or picking them up if they're sick, right? So I think what's important in the board as a whole is that we don't get skewed with the membership one way or the other, whether it's parents, teachers, community, favoring any one particular issue. And that's why I said in the beginning, I don't come to this election with an agenda, and I'm not an activist for any one cause. And I think, over the next 5 years, we're going to have a lot of different issues, some affecting parents, some affecting the community. And we really need to have that balance and that perspective on the board. And I do think it's a challenge if we wouldn't have, if we have less than half the board members not being, having kids in school.
Thank you, Mr. Leibel. Ms. McDonald?
Thank you. So I am not a parent. I'm not quite at the stage in my life where I think that's the right decision for me. But I do have the perspective to take the question a little bit differently. Is I have the perspective of being a Sweet Home daughter. And I have a lot of brothers. And as we went through Sweet Home, we all had really very, very different approaches to learning, and what worked for us was very different across the board, to the point where there was some anxiety about that for my parents. I know there was a lot of decisions that had to be made about how they would approach each of our education, and what they would do with our teachers to make sure that we came out of our education feeling confident in our abilities, regardless of the fact that our abilities were different from each other. That was hugely important in shaping who I am and who my brothers are, and also how we understand what an education is and what is valuable in an education. That was really important to me, and especially seeing the anxiety in my mom as she worked through that with our teachers. really stuck with me throughout the years. And, just a shout out to our teachers for their flexibility and for how much they care about the diversity in their students and how willing they are to accommodate that. But also a shout out to our parents. Watching the PTA meetings, especially during this COVID-19 stuff, has been beyond inspiring to me. These parents are working so hard, and they're all so excited to be coming up with ideas and to be helping their kids and their children's friends through this together. I just had this, awe-inspiring just feeling, listening to these parents talking about what they can do and what their concerns are. This is their families, this is their community, and for me to see how involved they are, again, was just very inspiring. So I'm really looking forward to working with PTAs moving forward, and PTSAs. Again, I'm not a parent. I'm just not there yet in my life. And this is this is a little bit of a weird thing to throw on my resume right now, but I have been the community babysitter for a lot of Sweet Home for decades now. And it is a weird thing to say, but being a family's babysitter is being trusted with their children. Being with their children when you put them to bed, when their parents aren't there, which is really scary. You're a part of their family for this little window of time, and you get to see them at their most vulnerable. Family emergencies, they call the babysitter. Family celebrations, they need a babysitter to kind of wrangle all the kids so the adults can celebrate. You get to see families at home. You get to see what's important to them. You get to see what they struggle with in their private life. And I've seen it in so many different kinds of families in Sweet Home, regardless of class and race and religion. I've been in those houses, and I've spoken with those parents, and I've heard their concerns. So that's a really weird kind of thing to throw out. That's my experience in as close as I've gotten to parenting. I'm also a nanny, which is, very dear to my heart. But I'm not a parent, but I still think that I have a lot to offer the parents in our district, and I'm very willing and excited to work with them. And I find them very inspiring, especially right now.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. So our next question, we're going to start with Mr. Rabinold. And the question is, what is your experience as a parent, and how will that influence your decisions if you are elected to the board?
My experience raising 3 children, is that what the question's about? Oh my goodness. I was married relatively young. I can tell this story. It's okay. At age 22, I had my first child, and Jason now today practices, he's an orthopedic surgeon in St. Louis, married with my 3 grandbabies. I was just there, by the way. They are opened up a little better than New York. I got a haircut, and I was able to have a margarita on a patio. And I also was able to play a little golf with my son, who just destroyed me on the golf course. So raising children is not the easiest thing. It's not easy when you're that young. And then 8 years later, I had our second child, Joshua, who's my musician. Talk about different personalities, math, science, and maybe arts. There. He also spent some time out in Las Vegas, moved back, got married, doing well, writing music, working with me a little bit, and I think he's going to do well. My youngest is going to get married this September, hopefully, if the venue allows more than 100 people in. Otherwise, we're going to look for something maybe later. But she went to school in the St. Louis area, met a boy, of course, and now working for Boeing. Got her MBA too. So I'm pretty proud of her. Kids are great. I mean, that's really what it's all about. That's what education's all about. It's about the kids, helping kids succeed in life. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Ravenel. Mr. Rogers?
As I've previously mentioned, I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. The 8-year-old is already an orthopedic surgeon, so I got you beat, Dirk.
Good for
No,
you.
just kidding. But how this would impact my decision making would be directly in line with the mission and the goals of this, the district. So, well, I will be a parent. All the decision making, all the questions I'd ask, all the information that I would digest in order to make an informed decision would have to align with those as our priorities. And knowing that those priorities have been built on a sound foundation with a lot of input from a lot of dedicated people across the district, the board members, administration, teachers, staff members, and the students, I believe that would ultimately control for my bias of my own children, because those things would work to their betterment as far as their potential graduation outcomes and future successes.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Leibel?
Well, as I mentioned a few times now, I have 3 children and 1 on the way, so I'll have a big family. I'm one of 5, by the way, myself. I have a number of nieces and nephews also in the Sweet Home district. And, I think one of the things I would say as a parent is that's unique and special and is, when that child is born, and as soon as you look at that child, your whole world changes. And, it's amazing. And one week they're not there, and in the next week you couldn't imagine your life without them. And they're an extension of you, right? And you're rooting for them. And you're rooting for them in school, in their relationships, and in so many facets of their lives. But the one thing is you can't fight their battles. And that was something I, have learned. And in particular, what I want to emphasize with having kids that I've come to realize even more than I did before is the uniqueness of each child. I mean, you could be in the same house, and every kid, they have different personalities. My son, Jack, he loves to build. One day he wanted to he had a toy screwdriver, and he ended up unscrewing all the registers around the house. And I was wondering who took all the registers off. And, he's only 4 years old doing that. And so my daughter, Grace, she's a little more shy, but she loves to read, and Jane's different as well. So I think that, I recognize that every kid is special. They have a parent that loves them, and they have something that they are meant to do in this world. And as a school board, we need to give those kids an opportunity and a chance. And, when we talk about cuts and things like this, I grew up focusing on academics, but I had a track coach who said to me, Brian, you need to get, do something more athletic. To this day, I'm still running and jogging, but I know that for some kids, academics isn't their strength, right? And maybe they're meant to go into sports and become a gym coach or, something sports related. Maybe they're meant to be a teacher, maybe they're meant to work in vocations. We need a lot of people who are good at construction and these other fields and that. So my point about this is having kids, I'd love it if Jack turns out to be, a carpenter. I'd love him if he turns out to be a doctor. I'd love if my daughters turn out to be a doctor, a teacher, or a stay-at-home mom. The point is that our education system needs to think about all of them, and not just those kids that are doing well, but also the kids with special needs. And going through what we've gone through, we're going to have a big gap of time and education. And those kids with special needs, they're going to need a little extra help, perhaps, getting back up to speed. It's difficult if you have some social issues and things like that. So I think as a parent, those are a lot of the things you feel in your heart and you see day to day, not only with your kids, but their friends.
Thank you, Mr. Leibel. Ms. McDonald?
Thank you. So again, I'm not a parent. I mentioned it a little bit. I am a nanny. I have been nannying Charlie since he was 4 months old, and unfortunately I haven't been able to see him since the whole COVID-19 thing started. you know, that little boy is my heart and my soul, and I love him dearly, and I miss him terribly. And it's not the same as being a parent. You know, you always hear from, well, I always hear from parents that like you just don't know the feeling of loving a child until you're holding your child in your arms, and I recognize that. Um, but I think, you know, to a certain extent, the fact that I'm not in this for my own kids, for my own family, and because I want to use this situation to, you know, to focus on what I can do to set the path for my kids, it allows me a flexibility to really look at, you know, as Mr. Rabinold said, not look at the forest for the trees. Like I'm here for all of our kids. I'm here just because I care and because I think I can do a good job. I've seen our district from every level. My mom is a teacher. She's been a teacher at Sweet Home for as long as I can remember. I was a student at Sweet Home. You know, I was an athlete. I was in the musicals. I was running student groups. I still to this day will think about, you know, these 3 or 4 teachers that, you know, if they hadn't said that one thing to me, my entire life would be different. I think about those moments all the time. And I want to be looking out for all of the students in Sweet Home. You know, regardless of, you know, whether I know their names or whether I'm representing their school or, you know, whatever. I'm just here because I love kids and I love Sweet Home, and I've seen the power of a Sweet Home education. I've lived it. I feel it every day. I can't escape it in my house. So again, I'm not a parent, and I really look forward to the day where that's not true anymore. But until then, you know, I have Sweet Home, and I have, you know, this community to kind of help me have that magic. You know, kids are the future, and they're our inspiration, and they're our hope. So I hope to be a parent soon, and I look up to, like I said, our PTAs have been really inspiring to me. But until then, I'm just here for the kids that I can help. So thank you.
Mr. Morrow?
Well, I have a son and a daughter, and my daughter has 2 granddaughters in Albany, and they're quite unique, and they're both teenagers right now, so they're at the age where they don't want to spend any more time with their papa or their grandma. So but we have 3. My son lives nearby in the Sweet Home School District, and my wife and I babysit my 2 grandsons who are 3 and 5, and we have a new granddaughter who's Catherine, that's 3 months old. But the 2 grandsons, they run everywhere, so they keep me pretty good shape for an old man, I guess. But I think my eye opener for me is when my kids were growing up. I coached their baseball team, softball team. I did 12 years of a bowling league for Sweet Home Kids, and it was the diversity of these kids. They had single parents, no mom, no dad, as we brought before about kids staying with their grandparents too, and the poverty level too. And it was just, I always felt, what can I do to help these boys and girls, especially being at the Mel Lot. We always went to the snack bar afterwards, and mom and dad weren't there, and we ended up helping them out. We couldn't have them not get a little snack at the end of the day. So, and the other eye opener for me about being a parent too is I went to the ENL picnic last year over at Ellicott Creek, and I was talking to some parents from our students, and the home life they came to. We really don't realize how good we have it, and it's, for me as a board member, and lots of my how fortunate we are for watching my kids grow up. We've been very lucky, and there's a lot of kids that are still struggling and don't have any support at home. So I like to keep my I think I've seen that as a board member, and I think that's an asset for moving forward for next year. Okay, thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. For our next question, we're going to start with Mr. Rogers. Sweet Home has a very diverse population of students, and meeting the needs of our students is important. New challenges need to be addressed each year to ensure all students reach their fullest potential. How might your experiences help you relate personally to the needs of Sweet Home's children who come from diverse and sometimes challenging economic backgrounds?
Thank you, Mrs. McNamara. I think that we have to be mindful of everyone's background and resources. COVID-19 being one of them, there were many challenges and resources to be thoughtful of as those that didn't have access to the internet and what type of hurdles needed to be crossed for there. But understanding diverse backgrounds, I mean, that's something that I've, early on had a very humbling experience. When between the ages of 8 and 18, my parents were foster parents to many different children across the Western New York community. We had lots of children in and out of our house over that decade. And it really exposed myself and my brother and I to probably more than the average student, or average person that age would begin to understand about the diversity of their community and economic hardships that people have related to their own personal struggles. In higher education, working in higher education for the last several years, I've been involved in lots of programming and scholarship opportunity development to try to provide access and opportunity for people who have various diverse backgrounds and varying economic backgrounds and economic disadvantages that have not provided them an opportunity in order to pursue higher education without support. I've, again, working higher education, being aware, but not just related to higher education, but everywhere in today's modern world about gender sensitivity and using proper pronouns and non-gender specific bathrooms. So been a part of groups and community support that have worked to support the LGBTQ plus population. I've authored policies on diversity to try to attract employees that represent a different background than the majority of people who may work at a particular environment. So by doing things of awareness building and training, diversity hiring policies, and educating folks on how to be accepting of cultural differences. And then just first, related to Sweet Home, the district has overcome an enormous challenge by rethinking and redoing and reconfiguring and working with the families of children who are coming from many different areas and need across the globe and need English as a new language type resources, and trying to reorganize the district to try to meet those needs of a diverse background of language speakers, and trying to get them access to strong resources to be successful in our classrooms. So those are just some of the things that I've had experience with in my background, working with folks who may be different than who I am.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Leibel?
Well, I think, when it comes to diversity and background, I grew up in a neighborhood that the average family income was under $25,000. A number of my friends were on public assistance. Many of them did not have two-family home or two-parent homes. So there was a lot of diversity in the neighborhood I grew up in, and yet we still all loved each other. We still all had a lot of fun. My graduating class from high school was about a 1/4 white, 1/4 African American, 1/4 Hispanic, and about a fourth of every other race and ethnic background you can think of. So that's to me as diverse as you can get. But I think the diversity is a strength. We live in a diverse world, and so our kids at Sweet Home having exposure to that diversity, I have found, for me personally, has been a good thing, right? It helps you to relate to people, to connect with people. But you know, the other thing is we all had the same goals and aspirations and desires at heart. You know, they may be different, but you know, at heart they're to get better, to improve, to leave a legacy, regardless of our background. And again, every child deserves that opportunity. And I know one of the big goals for Sweet Home is having every child and every student college ready. And you know, they talk about the graduation rate into college, but we also need to look at the graduation rate from college, which is much lower, because some of these students, you know, do need a little more help, maybe because of their economic background, things like that, in preparing for the costs, getting scholarships, or just being prepared in general. You know, they may not have some of the advantages that other families do. I work with, by the way, I mean, I've seen growing up for kids, like I say, we're on public assistance. I work with clients with over $400 million in personal wealth. So you know, you talk about diverse economic backgrounds, I've seen it all. What's interesting in that is, I will say though, no matter what, money doesn't buy you happiness. It's the relationships that these people have with their community, and especially with their family. So, you know, I think I have a lot to offer in terms of understanding different backgrounds. I have a lot of friends from different backgrounds. You know, I went away to school, I came back. So, you know, I feel that I would bring a lot to the table in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Leibel. Ms. McDonald?
Thank you. So like I mentioned when I introduced myself, I've been incredibly lucky in my education, starting at Sweet Home, actually, that I've been able to study abroad in several different places, in several different languages. I think I started, I was on the Costa Rica, the Spanish Costa Rica trip when I was in high school, way back when. And since then, you know, that really inspired in me a desire to learn about other cultures, you know, not just from a textbook, but to go there, to meet people, to speak their language. I studied Peace and Global Studies in college, Peace and Global Studies and Political Science. I double majored. And the curriculum was about learning about different places in the world, learning about conflicts in different places in the world, and then also going there, seeing it, working with those people. I've worked in Haiti on education programming for Haitian youth. I worked in El Salvador on empowerment programs with oppressed communities. I worked with migrant solidarity in Central Europe during the crisis of the borders a couple of years ago. And what this does is, it's not, you know, I'm still a very lucky, very privileged person to live the life that I lead. But these experiences that I have helped me keep an open mind, that people are facing different problems for me, and they're coming up with different solutions to those problems than what I can come up with. So I need to keep an open mind. I need to be in constant communication, and I need to be willing to be learning for the rest of my life. You know, we all have to be adjusting and learning and in communication with each other to figure out the needs of our community. And it's not just one community, you know, it's hundreds of micro communities that come together to build something really amazing. I also have the personal experience in my family of when I was in college, we took in 3 boys from Sweet Home who were actually classmates who were living in a shelter at the time. And, you know, what happened after that was, you know, we had years of legal battles trying to get custody of these boys who were my brothers, who I love dearly. And that was really scary for our family. You know, are we going to be able to keep them? How are we going to pay for, you know, all of these new people? Where are we all going to fit in our house? You know, and there's a whole bunch of other really scary things about going through that kind of court process. And I think remembering that we have students who are living through that right now during COVID-19, who don't have regular access to computers or don't know if they're going to be in the same house in a month from now. That eats up so much mental energy that, you know, a teacher might look at them and think, like, I can't get this kid to focus. What's going on? We all need to be aware that our children's lives are so much bigger than it might look when you know they're not doing their homework. Why? There's so much happening there. And I didn't go through, the foster system. I just had this tiny interaction with how difficult that can be. And thinking about kids whose this is their entire life and their entire life is dictated by these processes, it's really important because we have those kids in our communities and we need to be willing to work with them and accommodate them and protect them and make sure that they're getting the education they need. So that's just my personal experience with that. And again, my experience with my international education, I've been really concerned about our ENL families and how we can make sure that they're getting reliable information. I know that a lot of times children who are learning English in school actually serve as the primary translators for their parents who don't speak English as well. And in a situation like COVID-19, having your child be your translator, like we need to make sure that we're getting reliable information to these families who may not know what resources are available to them, who may not know who to contact to find out this kind of stuff. These are all things that I've been thinking about as we move through COVID-19, and I think it's really an important perspective to bring to the table.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Mr. Morrow?
Well, our school board has mentioned this during many of our presentations, that diversity at Sweet Home is one of our major strengths. And I'm always amazed by when I'm attending different school functions, how you see how every boy or girl, no matter what racial background, cultural identity, they're mingling with each other. They have accepted their new neighbors in their backyard. But as a school district, we started out, we moved all the ENL kids to Heritage many years ago. And as that number has grown, the administration made a recommendation last year that to move the kids back to Maplemere and Willow Ridge back into their home school bases. And to do that, we had, there was a budget issue too. We had to hire 3 NLL teachers to accommodate that. But again, how the staff stepped up to the plate to make it work, that we had a winning program with the number of kids and the 3 teachers. And they decided to, one went to Maplemere, one went to Willow Ridge to help the new teachers show the way that the Sweet Home way, what was happening to meet the needs of these kids. Again, we have to meet the diverse crowd of kids that we have adopted over the years. I mean, we had to hire again more 3 NL teachers. We have physical therapists, we have occupational therapists, school counselors. We have a family support center that's the best in Western New York, that to help the needs of these families that are moving into Western New York into Sweet Home. So again, I think diversity is one of our Sweet Home strengths. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Mr. Ravenel?
Well, Mike, I think you kind of summed it up there. Sweet Home has really done a terrific job with Family Support Center and the diverse group of families we have, especially in the North End. I'm in the Heritage Heights area. That in itself has quite a diverse group of families. You know, I grew up in, suburban America, so I don't have a background in living tough, I guess. But, we are fortunate. We are fortunate that we have a school district that has the diverse population of families that we have, and it is a strength. I agree with Mike on that. Remember when I first ran for got together with some parents, a diverse group of parents, seeking to make some changes in the school district, including running members for the school board. And we got kind of marked or chastised as being part of one group or another. But, again, at the end of the day, we hung our shingle out saying diversity is our strength. And again, Sweet Home does have that. I still remember the English language learners and them coming and showing up when we were considering breaking up or sending some of these students to the other elementary buildings. What wonderful people they are. So again, that's my experience. Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Leibel, we're going to start with you for the next question. What unique perspective would you bring to the board that it doesn't already have?
Well, I think what's unique right now for me is that the board doesn't have is I have kids, very young kids starting in the school and kids that will be starting and then going through the whole process from beginning to end. So, having that perspective from start to end, or at least right now, the launch, so to speak, of a family into the school system. And, so I think that would be a big strength that I could bring to the table. My kids have received services from Sweet Home even before they started at the school. And without going into a lot of detail, what I can tell you is that it's made a great bit of help for one of my children that had a special need that they needed. And, fortunately we were able to get the help that we needed. And I can tell you the Willow Ridge has been a great help in that regard. But I think, that would be something I could really would bring to the table, and fresh ideas. We have a school board that in some cases people have a number of years of experience, which I think is wonderful and great. But I also think it's nice to have an opportunity with somebody, who has a more recent experience with the schools and perhaps can bring new ideas and a fresh experience.
Thank you. Ms. McDonald?
Thank you. So I think, probably the most unique thing that I can bring to the table is that I graduated from Sweet Home 9 years ago. For me, it feels like a really long time. It's about a third of my life. But it's really not that long ago. Sweet Home sent me off into the world, and I know what our Sweet Home graduates have to face, because that's where I am in my life right now. I know, what it's like to have to be faced with, the rest of your life paying off student loans. Really scary. How do you afford rent? How do you afford in this job market? How can you find a job that is, not even like matching your 401k and all of those great things, but just paying you a living wage? How do you find that? These are all things that are real in my life, and my teachers, the people who taught me, everything that I know about myself, are still at Sweet Home. I know Sweet Home's core programs because I was in those classrooms. I know the direction that I needed that maybe I didn't get. Things like how to fill out taxes was a really scary lesson for me to learn. But I also know that, again, without a word here and there from my teachers, my life would have gone in an entirely different direction. I'm a young person at the start of her life. If this position is for 5 years, and in 5 years, maybe I will have kids, I think that perspective of being a young person connected to social media, connected to some students who are still, who are siblings of my own classmates, that's a huge insight, a huge perspective that our board does not have right now. I feel really protective of our high schoolers. it's such a difficult time in a person's life. It was a difficult time in my life. And it's going to get scarier. You know, once you leave Sweet Home, it really gets scarier. And I feel protective of them, and I want to be there for them as students. I don't want to not just be reaching out to them through their parents or through their teachers. I want to be working with students, and I want them to feel like they can approach me. A board member is kind of like a scary title for a teenager to talk to. But I want to be approachable. I want to be there for them because I was them, it seems like yesterday. I think that perspective is really important, and especially moving forward in this like reimagining our new normal. We have to be super creative. We have to be innovative. We have to be thinking about new ways we can do things. And as a young person who's trying to figure that out for herself, I am really excited to have the opportunity to bring that to the board.
Thank you, Kaylee. Mr. Morrow?
I guess being unique is, for me, is I have been around for a long time. I started at the Dexter Terrace PTA, and when we moved over to Willow Ridge, I was on the Willow Ridge PTA. I was actually on the playground building committee that we built in I think in 1988, 89. We moved up to the middle school PTA, and I was also part of the high school PTSA. That was the first year with a group of great administrators and teachers that we had. We got students involved in the PTA, so we had a representative from each class, and that was a true Parents, Teachers, Students Association. I guess being around, I mean, I've been involved with a lot of activities. So my favorite one is the high school musical. I help the students build the musical sets. We've been doing this for 11 years. Dollars to Scholars, I get into the schools. I love when the students and the teachers will sit down to me and explain what's going on into their classrooms. And the different other events that, again, being retired, I'm able to go during the day. I guess the accessibility and the, even though I do have requirements for babysitting kids, but one will be in Maplemere, so I can go babysit him maybe with Mr. Ryan over at Maplemere. And there's a bunch of other activities, but I guess, like I say, it's been being around for a long time, and I've been involved in a lot of organizations and visitations, and I think I know the school, each building inside and out, and I think it's the experience of being on the board for a long time. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Mr. Avenel?
Reimagining education in New York scares the heck out of me. I'm not so sure we as a society can depend solely on technology. I think that the experience children and students have in a social environment, in a classroom, interacting with adults is very important. So, you know, I've been around a long time. So, you know, I guess my uniqueness is that I have the experience, but I'm not unopposed, or at least I'm open to looking at, seriously considering new ideas and thinking. But at the end of the day, you know, I think the role of a board member is really, their job is to, well, you know, we go to a lot of conventions, we get lots of books, we get lots of lectures on different things. So we're always expanding and learning about new things and new ways. And really, so the board member becomes the filter for these ideas to help the district move forward. So I'm a big believer in that, and I guess that's not necessarily unique, but that's where I come from. I still, one of the greatest speeches, seminars I went to, lectures I attended at a conference about resilience and teaching kids how to be resilient. What a great life lesson. And so, and I believe, again, that as a board member, we should finds something we think works and believes in and move it forward. So, but I guess that's all I have for that, Sherry. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ravenel. Mr. Rogers?
I think that what I would bring to the board that's not represented right now, to the best of my knowledge, is a variety of different things. And first and foremost, I think that is that my college and career experience that I have as far as perspective on, being a director of admissions for the, past 7 years, what makes a strong college application, what type of academic credentials, our local colleges, state colleges, Ivy League, prestigious colleges, what type of academic caliber that they're looking for in their applicants, and what Sweet Home could do to try to, develop curriculum or courses that may help students get the edge in the college application process. But I also have I don't want to say that college is for everyone either. I think that there's a lot of good resources out there and tools and experiences, internships and co-ops that can, what we do with, participating in Erie BOCES, that can expose students to other colleges other careers that are available to them. Even now in my current role, working for Cooperative Extension, I work with a wide array of, the agricultural community. And that's everything from, your farmers and growers to breweries and wineries and all the agribusinesses that are out there that are really, being an essential part of this pandemic and what they can do for their community, and have opened up a lot of other opportunities. So I think it would bring a good position and understanding of that from my background. Also, in my current role, I work for a not-for-profit sub-government agency. So that's a very complicated way for saying that we get a significant amount of federal, state, and county funding. So I have to be able to work with legislators and decision makers higher up in the government that influence our day-to-day, and what that means to build relationship and network and liaise with those same folks that have a vote when it comes to educational programming or educational decisions, and know who those local people are, and be able to have them pick up the phone when somebody calls. I think that could be an advantage to being on the board. I've, in my current role also, I've done a significant amount of grant writing, and know, the different resources that are available for that, and how to get support for those resources, and the nuances that are involved in developing budgets. And I hope that I can help bring perspective to that to Sweet Home. And finally, I report to a board. So my boss is a board as well. So I hope that I could learn from my own experience about what I need to do in order to meet their needs, what their expectations are, and help be on the other side of the table as a person who understands what it's like maybe for a similar pseudo role that the superintendent may have, as they're trying to work with the board and help to set expectations, and how to be able to communicate effectively across both sides of the table. So those are some of the things that I think would be unique that I would bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. So for the next question, we're going to start with Ms. McDonald. We are proud of our Sweet Home graduation rate being 96%. Can you provide details or examples of how you can continue this positive trajectory for our students?
Yeah, thank you. So like I spoke about earlier, my family, me and my brothers all have a lot of different approaches to how we learn and what works best for us as students. I've been an avid student my whole life. I often say, like being a student is what I'm really good at. And it was very different for some of my brothers, and, what subjects we liked, and our ability to process things is different. So I think being flexible and knowing that there is no one size fits all to teaching. There is no one size fits all to a path to success. Being flexible and tailoring our students' education to them is a huge strength of Sweet Homes. I also think that right now we're in this really unique moment where our students are probably the most appreciative people in our community about their education. I hear stories about, I was on a walk the other day and with my mom, and we saw one of her students, and he said, you know, I just want a pencil in my hand again. I want to be sitting at a table in the classroom with my friends. Our kids right now are passionate about their education in a way that I think we haven't maybe ever seen before. They know what they're missing right now by not being in a classroom. They know what they're missing by not being in front of their teachers. Harnessing that sort of passion and appreciation for their own education and helping our students be invested in their own education, feeling excited about what they're learning, relating things that we're teaching to their life. I keep thinking about these books that I read about the Dust Bowl in the 1920s and the 1930s. And, you know, these big generational struggles that we learned about, that I learned in my ELA classes, and how applicable those lessons are to me right now. Making education tangible to our students is, I think, perhaps our greatest resource in something like graduation rates. If they feel like what they're learning is directly responsible for their next step, is directly going to help them move into the next phase of their life, it's not something you can take for granted anymore. You know, it's something meaningful to you that you're using to build your life step by step by step. And again, in this moment where our students know exactly what and how important a Sweet Home education is, we can use that and harness it to bring that into next year and the year after that. What's important to our kids, and how can we bring that into our classrooms? That's something that I'm really excited to work on and to think about as a group.
Thank you, Kaylee. Mr. Morrow?
It's always been a struggle to keep that night, or I mean, our goal, board goal for a number of years has been that everybody graduates at 100%. It's we've been told many times that's unachievable, but if you're always looking for or even a 4% failure, that you're not meeting all the needs of every student here at Sweet Home. If there's one positive part of this COVID-19 is distant learning is not the perfect scenario, but it has opened the doors for teachers, kids, and their parents to communicate. And I think for years that this is what we've been struggling to find a way how to get their parents more involved in their students' education. 2 years ago, we started at I still the Dexter Terrace School in my eyes, but we started the Ready Academy. We have a bunch of kids in the high school, and we have some kids in the middle school who moved up to the high school that just struggle in a classroom setting. And with an X amount of kids that was assigned by the staff and their principals, they moved to the Ready Academy. And in 2 years, it's been a very successful program. Has it been 100%? No. But we have a bunch of kids that would have never have passed. And I know I was there during a Thanksgiving, sat down with a bunch of kids for a Thanksgiving lunch, and we had a conversation with some of the kids about their struggles and how going to this Ready Academy has really made the difference for them. And one boy said, I'm going to go to college now. If I didn't go here, I would never be going to college, and he wants to play football. So again, we have to look for different strategies, different learning ideas, and to make the needs, have every kid have the same needs to make graduation and have it 100%. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Mr. Avenant?
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, I'm just gonna say that.
Am I, okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
You're all
Okay.
set.
Nope.
Hold on a second. Here we go. So many years ago, they used to talk about social promotion, graduating students just because they reached a certain age. It's how long Mike and I have been around. So we then developed over the years, we, schools in general, and Sweet Home Schools, something called continuous improvement. What a great concept. And that takes what we've learned. We've come with what I think the phrase is a learning community. So we're learning what works, what doesn't, and then we move on. We keep expanding and adding programs that works. We pay attention to all types of students, all needs of students. And actually, and I still, probably in recent years, I still would ask the question, let's not forget about the general regular student. I don't know if that's the appropriate word or not these days. But we can't forget about them. Are we meeting their needs? And you know, surprisingly enough, Sweet Home, because of its, I think, general thinking, continuous improvement, there was a program out of Rochester, I think they had started, where it tries to motivate. It's about motivating students to do not just what they need to get by and graduate, but to advance. So Sweet Home really is on a pretty solid grounds to stay on that trajectory. And Mike's right. You can't. I believe 100% actually should be the goal and should never not be the goal, because otherwise you're just setting yourself up for failure. We have a great school district in that regard. You know, even though I've said a lot of things about the teachers union, our most valuable employee is that teacher in the classroom. We need to make sure that they're the best and they continue to do a terrific job. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Avenant. Mr. Rogers?
So I think that to try to preserve or increase, a 96% rate is something to be very proud of. But I kind of would attack it with a double-edged sword, right? You need to have some quantitative and some qualitative. In quantitative, what I mean, I'm a big data guy, and I think what the district data team, at least when I was serving on the board, was going at it from a quantitative point of view, at looking at, and if I'm remembering correctly, how Mr. Day was kind of leading the charge here about looking at credits earned of the middle school students to making sure that they were on the appropriate path with a minimum threshold of credits that needed to be earned to be in line with a student who graduates on a normal trajectory. And I think that was a great way to be able to identify those students early on that were at risk for not graduating. So I think that, continuing that type of work for the district data team to continue to identify case studies or scenarios that are indicators of academic risk and to have interventive strategies earlier on in the process as opposed to late into the game when they're in their senior year is a very proactive way at preserving or increasing that graduation rate. And qualitatively, I think that it's to continue to support the professional development of our teachers and administrators and to continue to have them learn about best practices that can enhance the academic quality of their classrooms. And they can only be doing that by learning from experts that are maybe in neighboring districts or across the country, or maybe adopting practices that are, best world practices. And they have to be, and I know that budget constraints can be tough when you're talking about professional development, but I believe, we are a system of education and learning, and education is continuing throughout your life. And those are folks that we employ need to be continually educated. So I think that if we're going to preserve this 96% rate or increase it, it is to dig into the data and look for trends, and also look outside of what we're doing already for practices that may assist us in reaching that 100% goal.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Leibel?
Yeah, you know, I think that what's really important is that every kid have a mentor. I think, you know, that goes a long way towards a child's success, whether you're in grade school, middle school, or high school. I was fortunate enough, I had a handful of mentors that believed in me, that made me feel that I was going places. And you know, a lot of these kids, you know, they may not get that at home, but they can get that through a track coach, a football coach, an art teacher, you know, or a special education teacher, or someone who speaks their language, their native language. So I think, you know, looking at programs and understanding, you know, do these kids have mentors? And when I say these kids, I mean, you know, examining and focusing at-risk students. And to echo with what Justin said, we need to look at the data. And I'm sure that looking at that, we would find that there's certain characteristics that we can identify these, you know, at-risk students for not graduating. I also think, you know, we have to be very thoughtful about providing resources to those families, whether it's social, psychological, counseling services, things like that, because, you know, some of the kids that are at risk, some of the students that are at risk, you know, some of it's not an academic reason. In fact, for the most part, it probably isn't an academic reason. It's probably that somebody is struggling with a social issue, or some other issue that is affecting their academics, or they're being influenced in some way outside of school. So I think those are important to have the resources available to those families, to make sure that those resources are available in a prompt way. You know, I've heard stories of people waiting months to get access to certain services, and you know, that we just can't have that, because a few months in a student's life is a big deal. And I also think we need to look at what academic standards are out there and what's necessary. What does graduation mean? What does that look like? What does that entail? You know, I know there are certain standards at the state level that we have to meet, but beyond that, does every student that graduate need certain academic criteria? Are there things that we can substitute? You know, as I said earlier, we need to look at vocations and other things. Maybe we're pushing the kids too hard into pushing into a college direction. And again, you know, I went to Canisius, I went to Notre Dame. I'm in favor of going to college for every student, but I also think we need to be careful. We push kids too much into a direction that is not appropriate for them. You know, I know very successful people, and some of my most successful clients don't have a college degree, and they're making millions of dollars a year as an electrician, for instance. And so, you know, I think those are things we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leibel. For the next question, we're going to start with Mr. Morrow. Can you give an example or two of how you've contributed to the Sweet Home School community?
I actually made a list. Probably. Well, as I mentioned before, I lived in Parkview. I was up on the Parkview Community Board for a number of years on every elementary that my kids attended to. I'm also on the Health and Wellness Committee, where with the other members, I'm on the District Audit Committee that's required by or mandated by state law, and with Nadine, and we're part of an audit or a policy committee to review policies before they are presented to the board for discussion. Those policies are each follow an educational law or New York state law, or maybe federal guidelines or state law too. I know I've gone probably to almost every music festival. One of my favorites is the moving up days in the elementary schools and the middle school. They have a bunch of award ceremonies at the middle school. I've gone to every musical, I think every art show that we've been invited to. And and again, one of my favorite projects I did many years ago was the Willow Ridge. I met so many people on that project in Willow Ridge that I still, when we're out, my wife and I are out for a walk, I still run into them. And I would have never met some of these people if I've never been on that part of the committee. So I think I sign up for everything what I can do. And I think just, I've always been a very active person within the schools, and I benefit from being retired. Okay, thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. Mr. Rabinold? You're muted. Still muted.
You? How's that?
There you go.
Good. So many years ago, I got involved with my, well, I'm sure we all have participated with our children's sports. I remember them a lot. One way or the other, we helped coach those kids. My sons played hockey. That created a whole nother effort. I think we had put on the Sweet Home ballot 3 years in a row a request to make Sweet Home hockey a federated sport. It finally did come to Sweet Home. I got involved with many other parents in terms of issues at Sweet Home, and again, I eventually ended up running for board myself. So what have I done? Well, I participated in many organizations rather than sit back and complain, including the Amherst Senior Citizens Foundation Board, which reaches out to various programs that support seniors in Amherst and raises money and funds that. I've also, again, been on the Amherst Recreation Commission for 7 years. And again, learned a lot about the fields and the sports in the town, which again, Sweet Home participates in to a certain degree. I think Mike Morrow's right. It's hard to talk about yourself, but I think generally I consider myself a volunteer and always look for an opportunity to get involved. Certainly, I think all the board members realize that their volunteering there is a very important role, and it adds to many different committees and avenues to help and volunteer your time and efforts. That's all I have, Sherry. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers?
Thank you, Sherry. Yes, like Mike and Dirk have alluded to, serving on the board is certainly a commitment to the community, and I'm proud to have done that for a period of time. We're supporting the Dollars for Scholars I've done, running the Penguin Run that's benefits Cradle Beach Camp, and member of the Willow Ridge Community Association are some of the things I've been a part of.
Thank you. Mr. Leibel?
Well, I think probably the big thing I do is pay my taxes. That helps, I think. And we're members of the PTA for Willow Ridge. We're very involved with Willow Ridge. I think, running for school board and being on the school board, it's a volunteer activity, as it's been mentioned here before. And I think even, whether you win or you lose, just running for the school board, you're bringing attention to the issues and the ideas that are important for the community to be aware of. I'm involved with an organization that provides STEM scholarships for a number of high schools, including Sweet Home students. And I'm also involved with Cradle Beach and the Willow Ridge Civic Association, the Newman Center, and a number of other activities around the schools.
Thank you. Ms. McDonald?
Thank you. I think the thing that I'm most proud of is there was talk a couple years ago about closing Heritage Heights, which is very, very dear to my heart. It's where I grew up. It's where all of my childhood memories take place. And I was at all of those board meetings, and I got up and I spoke in front of the board. I was very nervous. I remember I had 3 minutes to speak, and I don't even know what I said. As soon as I sat down, I was like, Mom, is that okay? I don't remember. But I spoke from the heart. I was really passionate about that subject. Heritage Heights is my home away from home, and I'm really proud of the way that the community came together to find alternative solutions to that, and I'm really proud to be a part of that. I also, when I was at Sweet Home High School, me and a few of my friends started a student activism group called Students for Hope that raised money for education programs around the globe. We raised money to build a school in South Sudan, and we had a couple of really big fundraisers a year. The one that I'm most proud of is the Boo Benefit, which I don't know if I think it's still going on. It's a safe alternative for trick-or-treating for little kids. We did it at a couple of different buildings depending on the year. We had it at the high school and we had it at Heritage Heights. And it was a really neat way to get the entire community involved in celebrating that holiday. You had high school students volunteering, giving out candy to the elementary school kids who got to be there with their family. Everyone was dressed up and had a lot of fun. And that's just such a fun way to see your community outside of the school day. And the fact that they're still going on right now is really humbling for me. We also had a walk that we would do. I think it was called the Walk for Hope. It's getting to be a couple years now. Where we had, I think, a couple hundred people walking through the UB campus to raise funds, and that was a really fun time as well, and something I'm very proud of. I also love going back to see the high school musicals. They were some of the most fun I've ever had in my life, and watching what our music programs and our kids can put together is just really incredible for me. So I love going to see that, and to see our school concerts, which are another program really dear to my heart. So
Thank you. Okay, and now we're at the last question. Mr. Ravenel, we're going to start with you. What do you believe are the basic requirements for successful school boardmanship?
Let me make sure, am I unmuted here?
You're all set.
I'm all set, huh? You think I could probably write a book on that, right, Sherry? I mean, 20 years. I think as a board member, the number one thing you have to have is kind of an open mind. You also have to understand what you stand for and what you want to accomplish for the community. So there's a sense of fairness, openness, fairness, and study. I mean, that's probably the three main components. Again, I'm a big believer. I still have a lot of books I've gotten over the years I haven't read, I'll admit to you. Now I can get those books, by the way, on, what is it, audio, whatever they have, Amazon on tapes, and I can listen to it on long rides. But there's a wealth of information that helps you become a better board member. I think over the years, I certainly have had, I've been in a position where I was the only no vote. But, you have to understand that your belief and your commitment to something, you got to stand up for it. But on the other hand, I thought there was always a great level of decorum and professionalism on this board. And there may have been one particular issue, we'll call it Heritage Heights. But in the end, we got back together and we moved forward. So that I think is a successful board member and a successful board, that they can take on tough challenges and come back to where they all, again, treat each other cordially, respectfully, professional, and the district moves forward for the benefit of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers?
I would say three things. Commitment. I think that you need commitment to be on this board. There's a lot of reading, events, and meetings that you have to attend, and it does take away from some of your personal time. And I've been lucky to have a great supporting cast at home to support me in these type of commitments in the past, and hope to rely on those in the future. I think community awareness is another one, is that you have to be able to talk to people, talk to the students, talk to the community, talk to talk to parents of the kids that go to your kids' school, and understand what they're, what they're celebrating and what they're challenged by. And, try to have that awareness as a board. And being thoughtful. I know I've mentioned in the past that I can be data driven and rely on numbers, but numbers don't always tell the full story. And you have to understand the entire situation in order to make an informed decision. And you have to be aware of the fact that almost no decision has zero fallout. So there is going to be somebody who is a have-not when there is a decision made by the board. And I want to make sure that the members of that board have given everything careful consideration before they act. So I think that commitment, community awareness, and thoughtfulness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Libo?
Well, I think, that being on a board, and I've been on a number of boards, but being on this board in particular, you would require good judgment. Anybody who comes to a board with a particular issue or thing they're favoring, over the next 5 years, or if it's even longer than that, 10, 15 years, you're going to face a lot of different issues from all kinds of people and with different agendas. And you have to be able to look at those issues in an unbiased and a balanced way and in a thoughtful way. And as Justin mentioned, some of that requires study. So I think that's a very important feature. We talk about experience and all these other things, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to, do you have good judgment? And good judgment is a product of, yes, your experience, but also your ability to interpret information, but also your values and your background. And I think, what I've mentioned here is, I grew up in a neighborhood that was very diverse. And I think that right now I'm working in an environment with very wealthy people. And I think that allows me to see a variety of perspective and have a balanced view. And at the end, again, as was mentioned earlier, I think also you have to be caring, right? I mean, all the numbers, all the information, all the data, that's one thing, but you got to care about what you're doing. You got to have some passion and desire behind it. And, and I know in these meetings, at times that may not come across with me. I may seem very straight-laced, but I can tell you, I care a great deal about the community and about our families. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Libo. Ms. McDonald?
Thank you. I think, the way that I've been thinking about the board, especially as I watch all of these different meetings about COVID-19 and, seeing board members in their PTA meetings, seeing them in the task force meeting. The board members are the caretakers of Sweet Home School District. Every meaningful decision that gets passed in Sweet Home has to get passed through the board. They need to be contemplating, I was speaking to one board member about light bulbs was like a huge thing. All these minute details that seem like grains of sand on a beach somehow come together to build Sweet Home School District. And Sweet Home School District is building people's lives. I speak from personal experience. My life started at Sweet Home. Who I am as a person started at Sweet Home. And that's possible because of the decisions that were made by the Board of Education to allow me the opportunities that I had, to get me the school supplies that I needed, to make sure that the environment that I was in was conducive to learning and growing and exploring. So this aspect of caretaking, it's not just caretaking for the students, it's caretaking of the teachers, making sure that our teachers have the resources that they need to teach in the best way that they're able to teach, that we're supporting them and that they know that we believe in them, especially as we're going through this crazy COVID-19 home learning phase. Our administrators need to know that we're willing to work with them and meet them in the middle and think out of the box so that we're all coming together to make these brilliant solutions that will lead us into the future. Our community members who are not involved in the school district need to know that we're there if they need us, that we have resources that they can make use of, that we're listening to their concerns, and it doesn't matter if they're not a parent of a current student or they're not a teacher. They're still part of our community, and we are here to help them through, whatever they need help with. I was thinking about, what's really important to me. I think it was the task force meeting that really kind of brought it home for me. Like, what is important to me for Sweet Home in getting through COVID-19's craziness? And the three words that came to mind for me were compassion, communication, and collaboration. There is no getting through this if we're not willing to work together. We need to be communicating with each other at every level. Regardless of administrators, staff, faculty, students, parents, neighbors, all of us need to be paying attention to one another, making sure that we're aware of our strengths, but also our weaknesses so that we can fix them as quickly as possible and address them before things get out of hand. And we need to be compassionate. We need to be looking out for one another, lifting each other up instead of trying to tear each other down. These are the three things, I think: collaboration, communication, and compassion. That's how we're going to move forward. After all of this COVID-19 craziness is done, those are still three really important things to bring with you anywhere you go. And for me, I think that's what's most important.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Morrow.
Well, we've board members have always had a great opportunity to take training sessions through the Erie County Association of School Boards and the New York State School Board Association. And one theme I always hear from when we go to their training sessions is we need to understand our role. The superintendent is our only employee that we hire. The other ones are our recommendations from the superintendent. You got to understand your role and let the superintendent be the superintendent of his staff. We need to do our homework before we show up for the meetings. We have, if you don't understand anything, don't blindside the presenters or your superintendent. Give them a call. Let them explain it, but don't. You got to be respectful of his role and our role. I always say treat everybody as he or she is a member of our team. And last, I said this to my kids many a times, is this: don't ever lose your trust, because if you lose it, you'll never get it back. And I think the board, the seven of us, have earned the trust of each other. And I think we do a very good job working together. Okay, thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. I'd like to thank all the candidates and everybody who sent in questions. And at this point, we're done with Meet the Candidates, and I will turn this back over to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mrs. McNamara. I appreciate that. Thank you for all of our candidates for the time and your well thought out answers to our questions tonight. I think this has been a very informative session for the participants that are here. Our agenda was actually very short on it. It was just these two items. And I've just got one thing left I want to discuss with the board, the email I sent a little bit earlier, how we might participate in the graduation. So the rest of you, you're welcome to stay on if you want. Otherwise, we're going to be on. This is just about board and in particular at the graduation, not the whole graduation process, but they should only be here another couple minutes. So you're welcome to stay and listen. If not, thanks for participating tonight.
Yeah, have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
And thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Trying to get it back on my screen. Okay, for my fellow board members still here, if I could get my screen up because my fingers are sweaty.
How do I exit, Scott?
Yeah, Dirk.
How do I exit?
Oh, there should be on the top of your screen, it should say the word Zoom somewhere.
A red button?
Oh, yeah, way off to the left, it says leave.
Just the big X? Just
No,
I'll leave. I'll get you out, Mr. Ravenel.
I'll leave it. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks, Dirk. Take it easy.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, for the rest of you, I sent out I forwarded the message over that Christina Pinkowski sent me about the board participating. They're going to be videotaping graduation speeches on the 9th at the middle school auditorium. She asked if I or the board all wanted to participate, so that's why I forwarded to you guys. I told her I'd be happy to do one either way. So that's not that we won't do it. I just wanted to know if the rest of you wanted to participate in some way on that. She did say 5 to 10 seconds. She's a fairly quick process. First, I was thinking it was a longer speech, so I spread the message all the way through. So, what are your thoughts?
Scott, I wasn't sure how these virtual, because I wasn't at the meeting, how the virtual works. Do we have any other part in it? What role would we have?
This would be your role. So it's a number of different people. It's student speakers. It's the principal. The kids all get to do like 10, 15 seconds themselves, but it's all kind of going to be professionally, the speeches that aren't the kids are going to be professionally recorded at the middle school auditorium on one day, June 9th, and all of it gets kind of mixed into a very professional looking piece that kind of replicates in some way a graduation, but that the kids get to do. They can do walk across in cap and gown, or they can talk they can bring their parents. They have some flexibility in what they do and how they want to express their appreciation at that moment. But
Oh, nice.
that's what the board's piece would be.
Personally, I would like to say something to our graduating class, but I'll go with the will of the board.
Mary Ann, can you keep it to 5 to 10 seconds?
Oh, shush you.
That's what she asked for. That's
I deserve that. I deserve it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking at a typical graduation, obviously this isn't a typical one by any stretch of the imagination, but our role is shaking hands and listening to Mr. Day saying that the students meet the requirements of state education and Sweet Home School Board policies, and that's it. So we don't
I
normally.
know, but I'm gonna miss the hugs and the handshakes and the handing of the diplomas and whatever the will of the board is fine.
Other thoughts?
Do you think it would be possible for all of us to meet at the middle school and you speak, Scott, and the rest of us could just be there?
That's definitely possible.
Oh, okay, good.
You could go as a group, and then Scott could be speaking with everybody there if you wanted to. Sure.
I like that idea.
Good, I like that. Okay.
And I think, Scott, you could probably, it's 5 to 10 seconds, everybody. Like, literally, you get 3 words out and we're done. So I think if Scott just sort of says on behalf of the Board of Education, and, at the end, we all sort of just say, congratulations, right? We wave congratulations to the class of 2020. We can wear all of us or none of us shirts that, for them. Something like that. Unless somebody can pull out some class of 2020 shirts right real quick.
I like that.
We could probably get some of those class of 2020 with the toilet paper in quarantine shirts if we really wanted, Nadine.
I don't know where she went.
Oh, no, I'm still here. I gave her 2 thumbs up. Yeah, that's it.
I'm not sure Mr. Johnson was full on board. He was kind of like, oh boy.
Is everybody good with this idea?
Yes.
So they're setting up the timeline right now, but June 9th, and it'll be at the middle school in the auditorium. So we'll just have to figure out how to, socially distance ourselves while we do it, model the right beliefs. But I think we'll get that taken care of. As soon as I get the time, I'll forward it on.
I probably won't make the 9th. My schedule is pretty, it's during the day anyway. My schedule is pretty jam-packed that day. So, but carry on without me. But I won't be able to slip away in the middle of the day.
Maybe
What did we decide about that meeting on the 9th? I was just putting in my calendar and realized the meeting's still there, yes?
It is, yes.
Maybe we could do like late in the day, maybe right 6 o'clock-ish before the meeting? If they're doing it
Perhaps.
that late?
I'm not exactly sure the timeline, but I'll see is there a time that might fit better for you than others, Josh?
We're back at work now, so for me to come back anytime, I would say after. I'm back physically at work, so anytime after like 4:30 or 5 or later.
All right, well, I'll see what we can do. I'm not sure what the timeline's going to look like, but we'll see.
I'm one of 7, so it's fine. No big deal.
Okay. Very good.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Or
Wait,
whoever,
right.
that mayor.
Scott, you're still muted.
Yes.
There's Scott.
Sorry. I was trying not to get the echoes that I. Okay, I heard Mike make a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Good
All right.
night.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Thanks for those who hung on.